I thought this vacation would bring us closer together, but instead, it became the breaking point of our marriage. My wife and I had been married for 10 years. Life was good in many ways. We had 2 beautiful children who were our pride and joy. But over time, something had shifted between us. Like most parents, we got caught up in the endless cycle of responsibilities, school runs, work deadlines, doctor appointments, and everything else that came with raising a family. By the time we fell into bed at night, we were too exhausted to talk, let alone connect on a deeper level. Our days felt like they were running on a loop. I'd wake up early to help get the kids ready for school while my wife handled breakfast. After work, we'd tag team dinner, homework, and bedtime routines, only to sit silently in front of the TV before calling it a night. Weekends weren't much better, packed with errands and kids' activities. Somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, we had lost us. It wasn't always like this. Back when we were dating, my wife and I could spend hours talking, laughing, and just enjoying each other's company. But now, even when we did have free time, it felt like we didn't know what to do with it. Conversations had turned into discussions about bills or who would take the kids to soccer practice. That's when I suggested the vacation. A break from the routine sounded like exactly what we needed. No kids, no work, just the 2 of us reconnecting like we used to. I'd pictured long walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and lazy mornings where we could finally talk without interruptions. I believe this trip could help us remember why we fell in love in the first place. She agreed without hesitation. Maybe she felt the distance too, or maybe she was just ready for a change of scenery. Whatever the reason, we booked a tropical getaway, a chance to hit reset on our relationship. I was hopeful, even excited, that this trip could bring us closer. We arrived at the resort early in the morning. The warm sun, the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and the laughter of carefree tourists filled the air. The beach was breathtaking, white sand stretching for miles and crystal clear water glimmering under the sunlight. For a moment, it felt like the perfect escape. Our first day was filled with small joys. We walked hand in hand along the shoreline, letting the waves wash over our feet. She giggled when a small crab scurried past her toes, and I couldn't help but smile. It was the first time in weeks I'd heard her laugh like that. At dinner, we shared a candlelit table overlooking the ocean. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and we talked about how much we needed this break. It felt good, like we were starting to reconnect. But even amidst the smiles and laughter, I noticed the cracks. She spent more time on her phone than I liked, scrolling through social media or texting friends. When I asked her to join me for a sunrise walk the next morning, she shrugged it off, saying she needed to catch up on sleep. It wasn't a big deal, but it stung. In those quiet moments, when we weren't distracted by the beauty around us, the distance between us became more obvious. I caught her staring off into the distance more than once, her face thoughtful, almost wistful. When I asked her what she was thinking about, she would brush it off with a vague, nothing important. I didn't press her, but deep down I wondered if she was as invested in this trip as I was. Still, I held on to hope. After all, we were here to rebuild what felt broken, to remember why we fell in love in the first place. I told myself that these small moments of distance didn't mean anything, that they were just a byproduct of the busy lives we've been leading. This vacation would help us find each other again, or so I believed. But sometimes, when you ignore the cracks, they only get bigger, and I was about to learn that no amount of sunsets or sandy beaches could fix what was already slipping away. The beach was alive with energy one evening, a perfect blend of chaos and joy. The sun had dipped low into the horizon, casting an orange glow over the ocean waves. The air was filled with a vibrant mix of sounds. The rhythmic beats of Afro-Caribbean music blaring from speakers, the crash of waves against the shore, and bursts of laughter from the crowd that had gathered for the night's festivities. Vendors moved through the throng, shouting out offers for cold drinks and snacks, their colorful carts adding even more flair to the lively scene. At the heart of the activity was a large makeshift stage set up near the water, surrounded by tiny torches that flickered in the warm evening breeze. A lively announcer, microphone in hand, hyped up the crowd, calling for participants to join the much-anticipated dance competition. A semicircle of onlookers cheered, clapped, and whistled as volunteers stepped forward, each eager to show off their moves. Among the crowd stood my wife, her face lit with the same excitement that had first drawn me to her years ago. She had always loved dancing, and tonight was no different. She leaned toward me, her eyes sparkling. "I want to do it," she said, almost like a child asking for permission. Before I could answer, she was already slipping off her sandals and stepping forward toward the stage. I didn't think much of it at first. She loved these kind of moments, being in the spotlight, feeling the energy of the crowd. It was just her way. I stayed back, settling into my seat with a drink in hand, watching her navigate through the crowd with an eager smile. The announcer greeted her with enthusiasm, handing her a numbered sash to tie around her waist. The crowd cheered louder as she climbed onto the stage. I found myself chuckling softly. This was typical of her, never one to sit still when there was a chance to have fun. Part of me admired her confidence, how she could throw herself into the moment without a second thought. Another part of me, the more reserved side, preferred to watch from a distance. I didn't mind. I was content to let her enjoy herself while I stayed in the background. Then he appeared, her dance partner, a young, charismatic local with a confident stride and an easy smile that could charm anyone. His sun-kissed skin and athletic build suggested he spent a lot of time in the ocean or playing sports. His movements were smooth and sure, like he owned the dance floor before the music even started. He introduced himself with a bow that made my wife giggle. She gave him her hand, and from that moment, it was as if I didn't exist. They started dancing, and I watched as he twirled her effortlessly, making her laugh and blush. She seemed so carefree, so alive. For a moment, I thought maybe this is good for her. She deserves to have fun. But as the dance continued, a knot began to form in my stomach. The way he held her waist, the way she leaned into him, it was too much. I stood there on the sidelines, clapping awkwardly with the rest of the crowd, but I felt like I was in a different world. The cheerful music felt like a mocking tune in my ears. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Each laugh, each lingering touch, felt like a stab to my chest. Was this really about the dance? Or was it about everything we had ignored in our marriage? The distance, the silences, the feeling that we had become strangers sharing a life? Maybe this trip wasn't a new beginning. Maybe it was the beginning of the end. The silence lingered, heavy and unspoken. She often sought validation from others instead of me, and the applause was deafening when the music ended. But all I could feel was anger. As they bowed and exchanged smiles, I knew I had to say something. I walked up to her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can we talk for a minute?" She frowned but followed me a few steps away from the crowd. My frustration bubbled beneath the surface. "What are you doing out there?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This doesn't feel right. I think you should stop." She looked at me, confusion flashing across her face before it hardened into defiance. "What's the big deal?" she snapped. "It's just a dance. We're on vacation. Can't I have a little fun?" I tried to explain how it made me feel, but she didn't seem to care. Her tone grew sharper. "We're married, but you don't owe me, and you're not going to tell me what to do." Her words hit me like a slap. I wasn't trying to control her. I just wanted her to see how much this was hurting me. But in that moment, I realized she didn't care how I felt. This wasn't just about the dance. It was about how disconnected we had become, how little she seemed to value our bond. I swallowed my pride and gave her one last warning. "If you go back out there and dance with him again, you won't find me here when you come back." She laughed as if I was making some kind of joke. Then, without a word, she turned and walked back to him. The music started again, and I stood there for a few seconds, watching as she smiled and continued, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. Standing on the edge of the beach, I watched her spin and laugh with a man we barely knew, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit for a long time. Our marriage had been broken for years. And while she danced, I stood frozen, realizing how many times I had ignored the signs. The quiet dinners where we barely spoke, the nights spent scrolling on our phones instead of talking, the times she seemed distracted, and I convinced myself it was just stress or exhaustion. That dance was just a final straw, a painful reminder that we had been drifting apart for far too long. I turned and walked back to the hotel. I didn't storm off. I didn't call out to her. What was the point? She didn't even notice I was gone. As I reached our room, the emptiness hit me hard. It was the kind of silence that made you feel lonelier than ever. I started packing my things, my hands moving on autopilot. I didn't even have a plan, no destination, no idea what I'd do next. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there any longer. I couldn't stand to watch her prioritize a fleeting moment with a stranger over the man she had promised to love forever. I booked a taxi to the airport, my fingers trembling as I confirmed the ride. Sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase I just zipped up, it hit me. I was leaving behind more than just this trip. I was leaving behind the dreams I had for us, the life we built together, the woman I once believed was my forever. But in that moment, I knew I deserved more. Not perfection, not some fairy tale, but someone who chose me, who saw me. As I stepped into the taxi and told the driver to head to the airport, I felt the weight of everything I was leaving behind. Yet, for the first time in a long time, I also felt a sense of clarity. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to find yourself again. When I arrived home from the trip, the silence in the house felt heavier than ever before. It wasn't the kind of quiet that comes after a long day or when the kids are off at school. It was a silence of something missing. Her presence, her laughter, even the faint sound of her favorite music playing in the background. It was all gone. I sat down on the couch, staring at the empty spot where she would usually curl up with a book or her phone. The memories came rushing in. I thought about how we met, how her smile used to light up every room, how we used to talk for hours about our dreams. Back then, it felt like we were invincible, like nothing could ever come between us. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being us. Life got busy, work, kids, bills. Conversations turned into quick exchanges about schedules and groceries. The connection we once had was buried under years of routine and neglect. I couldn't stop replaying the moment on the beach when she laughed at me, her face full of defiance. "You don't own me," she had said. It hit me like a punch to the gut. She hadn't felt free in our marriage for a long time, and I hadn't noticed. Maybe I had been holding on too tightly, trying to control things when all she wanted was to breathe. But her words weren't the only thing that hurt. It was the way she chose to walk away, right back to the dance floor, to a stranger who could make her laugh in ways I hadn't in years. That image burned in my mind, and I realized I had been holding on to an idea of our marriage that no longer existed. The truth was, we had been broken for a while, pretending everything was fine when deep down we both knew it wasn't. I thought about the good times, the vacations, the birthdays, the nights we stayed up talking about nothing and everything. I wanted to hold on to those memories, but they felt like sand slipping through my fingers. They didn't outweigh the cracks that had grown between us. Love alone wasn't enough to fix what had fallen apart. Sitting there in the quiet of our home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was sadness, of course, for the life we had built together that was now crumbling. But there was also relief that I no longer had to fight for something that neither of us could save. It wasn't bitterness or anger. It was acceptance, a bittersweet understanding that sometimes, no matter how much history two people share, they can still drift too far apart to find their way back. I didn't know what the future held for me, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in a marriage that felt more like a battle than a partnership. Leaving her on that beach wasn't just about the dance. It was about reclaiming my own sense of worth, my own happiness. And while the pain of letting go was real, so was the hope that maybe this was the start of something better for both of us. After that vacation, my wife's life took a different turn. At first, she didn't seem to grasp the seriousness of what had happened. When she returned home from the trip, she was greeted by the emptiness of our house, a house we had once built together as a symbol of our partnership. My things were gone. The rooms felt colder, and the silence echoed louder than any words I could have spoken. She called me a few times during the first week, her voice filled with a mix of confusion and irritation. She didn't seem to understand why I had left, why I couldn't just come back and move on like nothing had happened. I tried to explain it, tried to make her see that the problem wasn't just about the dance or her partner. It was about years of feeling invisible, about her seeking validation from everyone but me, and about her refusal to see the cracks in our foundation. Over time, her calls grew less frequent. Maybe she was starting to accept that our relationship had truly ended. She stopped asking me to come back and started focusing on her own life instead. All that mattered to me right now were the kids. That beach dance may have been the final straw. But in truth, our marriage had ended long before she twirled into his arms.